Listen closely, because people reveal who they are long before they ever admit it. Not through dramatic actions, not through obvious cruelty, but through patterns of language so subtle they almost feel normal. Almost. The way someone speaks can either create safety or quietly drain it. It can invite connection or slowly train you to doubt your own reality. When someone consistently talks in a way that shrinks you, confuses you, or keeps you off balance, that's not accidental. That's information. Pay attention to how they center themselves in every conversation. No matter the topic, it somehow bends back toward their feelings, their struggles, their brilliance, their pain. You could be sharing a win, and suddenly you're consoling them. You could be hurting, and they're already explaining why they have it worse. Over time, you learn that your role is not to be heard, but to be an audience. Their words don't ask questions to understand. They ask questions to regain the spotlight. Notice how certainty replaces curiosity. They don't wonder, they declare. They don't explore, they correct. Their opinions arrive fully formed and immovable, delivered with a tone that suggests disagreement is ignorance. If you challenge them, even gently, the conversation shifts. Suddenly you're too sensitive, misunderstanding, or making a big deal out of nothing. Language becomes a weapon designed to end the discussion rather than deepen it. Watch for the subtle rewriting of events. They speak as if facts are flexible and memory is negotiable. Something they said yesterday is denied today with absolute confidence. When you remember differently, they sound almost amused, as if your perception is unreliable. This isn't confusion, it's control. Over time, their language trains you to question your own mind while trusting theirs. Listen to how apologies are shaped. If the word sorry appears, it's usually followed by a defense, a justification, or a redirection. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry, but you made me do it. The apology exists only to end discomfort, not to repair harm. There's no curiosity about impact, no pause to sit with responsibility. Their words are about managing their image, not acknowledging your experience. Pay attention to how often they speak in extremes. You're either amazing or disappointing, loyal or betraying, with them or against them. This kind of language creates emotional whiplash. It keeps you chasing approval, trying to stay on the good side. Nuance disappears because nuance would allow you space to think, and space threatens control. Notice the constant, subtle comparisons. They elevate themselves without appearing to boast, often by diminishing others. Stories are framed to highlight how competent, generous, or misunderstood they are. Other people are careless, jealous, dramatic, or incapable. The message is quiet but consistent. They are superior, and proximity to them is a privilege you must earn. Listen for how boundaries are described. When you say no, their language shifts to guilt, obligation, or accusation. After all I've done for you, I guess I just care more than you do. Your limit becomes an offense. Their words imply that your autonomy is selfish and their needs are moral. Over time, you may stop setting boundaries just to avoid the conversation. Pay attention to how they talk about empathy. They may speak about it often, even proudly, but their words rarely translate into consistent behavior. Empathy is something they claim, not something you feel. When you're hurting, their language quickly turns analytical or dismissive. When they're hurting, the language demands immediate attention, reassurance, and loyalty. Notice how silence is used. When words fail to control, they withdraw them. Conversations end abruptly. Messages go unanswered. Affection becomes conditional. Silence becomes a sentence you're meant to interpret, decode, and fix. When they speak again, it's as if nothing happened, and you're expected to follow their lead, grateful for the return. All of this matters because language shapes reality. The way someone speaks to you repeatedly becomes the way you speak to yourself. If their words minimize you, you start minimizing yourself. If their words confuse you, you start distrusting your instincts. This is how power quietly shifts hands without force. The most important thing to remember is this: Awareness is not about labeling someone, it's about listening to yourself. How do you feel after conversations with them? Drained or grounded, small or seen, anxious or clear? Your body often understands before your mind is ready to name it. You don't need to argue, diagnose, or convince. You don't need the perfect explanation. You need permission to trust what repeated language is showing you. Words are patterns. Patterns tell the truth. And once you start listening differently, once you stop explaining away what feels wrong, something changes. Their language loses its grip. Your clarity returns. You begin to respond instead of react. You reclaim the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you don't need to be spoken over, corrected, or diminished to belong. Because the moment you truly hear what's being said, you also hear what no longer deserves access to you. Pay close attention to how some people structure conversations, because the way they speak often tells you more than their actions ever will. One of the most telling signs is how consistently a person manages to bring every discussion back to themselves, no matter what the topic begins as. You might start by sharing an achievement, a challenge, or a personal feeling, and almost instinctively, the conversation pivots, subtly or overtly, to their own experiences. It may begin as a small interruption, "That reminds me of something that happened to me," but gradually it becomes a pattern so consistent that your own story seems secondary. You start noticing that your words aren't received as expressions of your reality, but as opportunities for them to showcase themselves, compare experiences, or validate their own emotions. What makes this behavior particularly insidious is its subtlety. They often appear empathetic or interested at first glance, nodding, leaning in, offering brief acknowledgments that feel encouraging. Yet these small gestures are designed not to cultivate understanding, but to maintain engagement until the conversation can be redirected to them. Over time, this pattern creates an emotional environment where you feel unheard or overlooked, even though you may initially question yourself. You might wonder if you're exaggerating, being too sensitive, or misreading their intentions, because on the surface they seem charming, attentive, or even caring. The redirection of conversation to focus on them is not always blatant. Sometimes it manifests as a subtle comparison, a gentle dismissal, or an attempt to subtly undermine your experience by reframing it through their lens. For instance, when you talk about a personal struggle, they might immediately mention a similar challenge they faced, one that was worse or more significant in their mind. The effect is not just a shift in focus, but a quiet lesson in hierarchy. Your experiences are always secondary to theirs. Their stories are the standard, the measure against which all other stories are weighed. This constant centering reinforces a dynamic where your voice becomes a tool to feed theirs rather than a valid expression of your perspective. Another dimension of this behavior is its persistence over time. It is not a one-off moment or occasional misstep, but a consistent pattern that subtly trains those around them. Friends, family, colleagues, or partners can start to notice a recurring sense of invisibility in interactions. Conversations begin to feel performative, as if your role is to witness, validate, or react to their narrative rather than contribute equally. The emotional toll accumulates quietly. You may begin to self-edit, curtail your thoughts, or avoid sharing personal experiences altogether to escape the predictable pivot to their agenda. The language used in these moments is equally important. They employ phrases that position their experiences as more urgent, more meaningful, or more challenging. They rarely pause to inquire deeply about your perspective or reflect on your feelings without tying it back to themselves. Even when they appear to listen, the underlying current is always about maintaining focus on their narrative. Awareness of this pattern is crucial because it is a reliable indicator of a relational dynamic where empathy is conditional and attention is monopolized. Over time, noticing this behavior allows you to distinguish genuine interest from performative engagement. It teaches you to recognize when a conversation is truly mutual and when it is designed to elevate one voice above another. By observing this subtle yet persistent self-centeredness in dialogue, you can start setting boundaries, reclaiming space for your own experiences, and learning to value interactions where your presence and words are fully acknowledged. It is in this awareness that the first step toward preserving your emotional clarity and autonomy lies. One of the most revealing patterns in speech is the way some people favor certainty over curiosity. Their language rarely invites exploration or genuine dialogue. Instead, it asserts, corrects, and dominates. Conversations with such individuals often feel like walking on uneven ground, where any misstep in opinion or perception is quickly met with correction or dismissal. They don't ask questions to understand. They ask questions to assert superiority or regain control. Even when you attempt to share an insight, a perspective, or a feeling, it is often met not with engagement, but with a sense of finality, a statement that implies there is only one right way to see things, theirs. This creates an atmosphere where ideas are not exchanged but judged, and your contributions are quietly or overtly invalidated. Language driven by certainty over curiosity often comes with a tone of authority. They speak in absolutes, as if the world must align with their understanding. Words like obviously, clearly, or you just don't get it appear in casual conversation, but they are not just phrases. They are markers of control. Even minor disagreements are framed as evidence of misunderstanding on your part. Your perspective is not wrong because it is different, but because it challenges the narrative they have established. In this environment, discussions cease to be collaborative and become a subtle battle where deviation from their certainty is seen as error and conformity is demanded without explicit instruction. Another common tactic is the minimization of your questions or reflections. If you ask for clarification, they may respond with impatience, condescension, or a brief explanation that shuts down further inquiry. This is not the behavior of someone who values understanding. It is the behavior of someone whose goal is to maintain their version of reality as the uncontested standard. Curiosity, when expressed by them, is often performative, a way to appear open-minded, while the ultimate objective is control, not comprehension. Over time, this pattern teaches others around them to silence doubts, second-guess perceptions, and avoid questioning authority, even in casual exchanges. Certainty over curiosity also impacts emotional conversations. When feelings or personal experiences are shared, the response is often analytical, corrective, or judgmental. Rather than seeking to understand why someone feels a certain way, the conversation is redirected toward solutions they dictate or explanations they provide. Your lived experience is reframed to fit their logic, leaving little room for authentic expression. This creates a dynamic where your reality is constantly measured against their interpretations, and your voice loses authority over your own feelings. The subtlety of this pattern makes it difficult to confront. It is not always aggressive or overtly hostile. It can appear polite, knowledgeable, even helpful. Yet the underlying effect is the same. It imposes a hierarchy of thought in which their certainty outweighs your curiosity. Over time, people begin to self-censor, doubting their own instincts and insights, because repeated exposure to this communication style teaches the brain that disagreement or inquiry is unwelcome. Recognizing this behavior is essential because it signals a relational dynamic where dialogue is restricted and autonomy of thought is undermined. By observing how consistently certainty replaces curiosity in their language, you can begin to differentiate between healthy conversations, where perspectives are shared and explored, and interactions that are structured to maintain control. This awareness allows you to approach such communication more strategically, preserving your own confidence, ensuring your voice is heard, and refusing to internalize a worldview that is dictated rather than mutually understood. Another pattern to watch for is the subtle yet powerful way some people rewrite reality through language. It often begins innocently, almost imperceptibly. "Didn't I say that?" or "That never happened that way," delivered with a casual air. But over time, these small distortions accumulate, creating confusion and doubt in those around them. When someone consistently challenges facts, memories, or events, it is rarely a matter of genuine forgetfulness. It becomes a strategic pattern of controlling perception, shaping narratives, and ultimately influencing how others perceive themselves and the world. What you remember may be true, but if it consistently clashes with their version, you start to wonder whether your mind is failing, and that doubt is precisely the effect they are seeking. This manipulation of reality often appears in everyday conversations. For instance, something as simple as an agreement or a past statement may be reframed. They might insist that they gave permission, offered help, or expressed a sentiment that aligns with their image, even when you recall it differently. Over time, repeated interactions like this create a cognitive friction where you question your own recollection. Small discrepancies are dismissed or mocked, and larger ones are argued with unyielding confidence. The message is subtle, but clear. Your perception is unreliable. Theirs is the truth. This dynamic can feel destabilizing, even terrifying, because it attacks a core sense of certainty about your own life and choices. Language is the tool that enables this reality rewriting. Phrases such as, "You're remembering it wrong," "That's not what happened," or "I never said that," are common, yet they are rarely followed by constructive discussion. They are not seeking resolution, but asserting control. In these moments, you are subtly trained to second-guess your memory, doubt your instincts, and rely on their version of events. Over time, the impact is profound. Your confidence in your own judgment diminishes, and your dependency on their narrative increases. What makes this behavior particularly insidious is how it often mixes with charm and plausibility. Their revisions are rarely absurd or obviously false. They are carefully crafted to appear reasonable, even logical. They may present partial truths or selective details to make their version more convincing. When confronted with evidence, they may escalate, deflect, or accuse you of overreacting. The manipulation is not just about one conversation. It's a long-term shaping of your perception and reality. Each instance reinforces the notion that you cannot fully trust your own mind, while they position themselves as the reliable arbiter of truth. The emotional consequences are significant. You may begin to feel unsettled, anxious, or excessively cautious about what you say and how you interpret events. Relationships may become exhausting as you are forced to navigate constant corrections and reinterpretations. This pattern also erodes trust, not only in the individual, but in your own ability to perceive events accurately. Recognizing it is crucial because once you understand that the pattern exists, you can begin to separate their words from your reality. You can start documenting events, trusting your instincts, and seeking clarity outside their narrative, reclaiming the confidence that has been undermined by repeated distortions. By observing how often and consistently someone reshapes facts, recollections, and agreements, you gain insight into their relational strategy. Their words are not neutral. They are calculated to maintain control, elevate their narrative, and destabilize your certainty. Awareness of this pattern allows you to reclaim mental and emotional space, preserve your own sense of truth, and navigate interactions with a clear understanding of the underlying intent, rather than being trapped in a perpetual cycle of doubt and confusion. One of the clearest indicators hidden in everyday language is the way apologies are delivered. At first, it may seem like accountability is present because the word sorry is technically used. But when you listen closely, the apology feels hollow, incomplete, or strangely unsatisfying. That's because the apology is not designed to acknowledge harm. It is designed to protect the speaker. Instead of standing on its own, it is quickly followed by an explanation, a justification, or a subtle shift of blame. The focus moves away from the impact on you and lands squarely back on them, their intentions, or their circumstances. These apologies often sound polished and reasonable on the surface. They may even appear emotionally intelligent, yet there is always a condition attached. "I'm sorry you feel hurt," reframes the issue as your emotional reaction rather than their behavior. "I'm sorry, but you misunderstood me," suggests that the problem lies in your perception, not their actions. The structure of these statements matters because language reveals responsibility. In these moments, responsibility is avoided while appearing to be accepted. Another common pattern is timing. The apology often arrives not because they recognize harm, but because tension threatens their image, control, or comfort. It is used as a tool to end discomfort, reset the dynamic, or move on without real repair. Once the apology is delivered, they expect immediate forgiveness and emotional closure. If you remain hurt or ask for change, their language may turn defensive or impatient, as though you are prolonging a problem that has already been handled. Notice how curiosity is absent in these moments. A genuine apology invites understanding. It asks questions, listens, and makes space for your experience. Conditional apologies do the opposite. They close the conversation. They signal that the matter should be resolved now on their terms. Your feelings are treated as an obstacle rather than something worthy of care. Over time, this teaches you to suppress your reactions because expressing them leads not to repair, but to debate. Another subtle element is repetition without change. The same apology may be offered again and again with the same wording and the same outcome. There is no behavioral shift, no evidence of reflection, no adjustment in future interactions. The apology becomes performative, a script used to maintain access, not a commitment to growth. Words replace action, and accountability is endlessly postponed. Emotionally, this pattern creates confusion. You may feel guilty for still being affected because technically they apologized. You may question whether you're being unfair or demanding too much. This is how language becomes a quiet form of manipulation. The apology shields them while placing the emotional burden on you to move on, forgive, and adapt. Over time, these conditional apologies erode trust. They teach you that your pain will be acknowledged only superficially and only when it serves the speaker. They also teach you that repair is unlikely, no matter how carefully you explain yourself. Recognizing this pattern allows you to separate words from accountability and understand that not every apology is an act of integrity. Some are simply a strategy to maintain control, avoid discomfort, and preserve a carefully managed self-image.